Africa Business News, proudly sponsored by EY.
Africa, it is huge, it is diverse, and its business landscape fascinating and dynamic. And that's our business here, as you know, on your favorite weekly African business stop in Nairobi. Bonnie Tunyo brings us the latest from East Africa. Only Sunday has the West African region covered, and in Johannesburg, I'm joined by Tumisho Greater. My name is Victor Homoeswana, and this is the Africa Business News. Mambo Boni, Kenya has pulled out of the East African Community Capital Markets Integration Project funded by the World Bank. What is the project about and why have they bailed?
Well, that's right, Victor. Kenya has indeed pulled out of the Capital Markets Integration Project meant to make trading in shares across the East African a lot cheaper and faster, Victor, and citing irregularities in tendering for the $3.8 million software. Now, Victor, the other EAC members, being Rwanda, Uganda and Tanzania, will proceed with interconnection as Kenya consults over the alleged irregularities. Burundi, which does not have a securities exchange, is expected to link up to the interface when it launches its own in its country. But Kenya's capital markets regulators have reservations about the quality of the software, Victor, being purchased and whether or not it will be compatible with the Nairobi Securities Exchange clearing and settlement system. You see, they are also concerned about the capacity of the vendor to deliver that particular product. Victor, the decision by Kenya, the most obviously developed capital markets in this region, with NSE being among the top 5 bosses in Africa, to sit out of the initial phase of the project now raises doubt. And according to media reports, the tender was awarded to Infotech, which is a Pakistani-based software firm based on terms of references that had not been approved by the region's Secretarial Council of Finance and Economic Affairs. Now, Victor, the software was to link the trading platforms, that is the NSE, the USA in Uganda, the Dar es Salaam Securities Exchange, the Rwanda Stock Exchange, so that they run as a single market in real time, Victor.
And Bonnie, moving further northeast, as Somalia picks up the pieces after decades of conflict, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has completed its first economic review on Somalia in more than 25 years. Tell us about that.
Yes, fantastic news, isn't it? Now, the International Monetary Fund has indeed completed its economic consultation on Somalia in more than 25 years, saying the economy of the nation that is rebuilding after decades of conflict grew by 3.7% in 2014 alone. Now, you see, Somalia's growth may lag behind the other markets in the region, but the government will be encouraged by the mere fact that an annual IMF Article 4 consultation has taken place, marking a step to rehabilitation in Somalia, even if the team held discussions in Nairobi. Now, according to the IMF, with a modest progress on the security front and an absence of drought and medium-term annual growth should be just about 5%, and nevertheless, growth will remain inadequate to equalize on issues such as poverty and gender disparities in Somalia. But you see, the report said the consumer inflation was at 1.3% in 2014, and it also forecasts real growth for 2015 of 2.7%, with inflation remaining subdued at just about 4%. And you see, Victor, the IMF noted that the government was still heavily indebted on aid, calling for the strengthening of the fiscal institutions and improving revenue rising in Somalia.
And finally, all of Uganda's secondary schools will be teaching the Chinese language following a $10 million funding initiative from China. Bonnie, what are the details of this?
Absolutely. Chinese language is set to become part of Uganda's school curriculum after the Eastern African country received $10 million funding from the Asian giant following a proposal, of course, submitted by Uganda's Education, Science and Technology and Sports Ministry to introduce the teaching of Chinese in schools. You see, the proposal, alongside a request for support from the Uganda National Curriculum Development Center, if you like, NCDC, was made during the official visit by China and by the Education Minister Jessica Alupo late last month. And you see, Victor, the Education Ministry official Franco Lam, who was speaking to China, said that teaching of this particular language will indeed improve not just the linguistics part of the curriculum, but all these other sectors. And besides providing training to the lecturers at the country's leading university, that is Makerere, China has also offered to provide teachers and to donate infrastructure materials in this space. You may also want to know that Zimbabwe last month announced plans to introduce several languages in its own curricula, including Chinese.
Asante sana Bonitunya, coming to us out of Nairobi, Kenya. Our next stretch sees Tumisho Greater joining us to talk about some of the big stories in Southern Africa. We're still with Africa Business News, and in our Johannesburg studio, I'm with Tumisho Greater. Like most people, this past week was dominated by the African Union Summit in Johannesburg, or the sideshow that ended up being the main feature. I'm talking about the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir Saga. But the summit was about a lot more than that, including the signing of a major trade alliance to advance the cause of intra-Africa trade. Let's hear from Tumi. You observed the Africa Union Summit, the AU Summit, and all the shenanigans that went with it. What's your take? What are your highlights?
A couple of highlights there, Victor. Let me just start that. I'm very happy that when it comes to this year's theme, the agenda really has been about putting women forward and, of course, making sure that they are involved in the advancement of economic growth and all the objectives that will ensure that we do see growth on the African continent. Apart from that, infrastructure, once again, was very focal, but you did touch upon a very significant launch of the tripartite free trade agreement. We did see those big regional blocks, and I'm talking about SADC, the EAC and COMESA coming together. So again, this is a very big step in terms of inter-Africa trade. Just in terms of some of the numbers that I do want to highlight, Victor, we're talking about more than 600 million people, and we're talking about a combined GDP of about 1.3 trillion US dollars. So you can understand the magnitude of these of this trade and of this launch and the significance this will have. But I must go back to the sideshow that you spoke about when it comes to the
Omar al-Bashir.
I had the pleasure of speaking with the Assistant Secretary General of the US, that's Linda Thomas Greenfield. Right. And this question was posed forward, seeing that the US is not a signatory to the ICC. They put a statement forward saying that they are urging South Africa to do the right thing. Well, seeing that South Africa, according to the Constitutional Court, to the High Court, didn't do the right thing, I did ask her if this will sever ties between the US and South Africa, and she went on to say, although they were urging South Africa to do the right thing, those ties will stay intact. So when it comes to trade, we'll still be able to do business with them.
Well, I guess there's a lot more to do in trade than arresting one president of one state out of 54. But talk to me about the gold sector, the mining gold sector yesterday, starting wage negotiations. I mean, what do you make of that? And is it likely to make mining less attractive, in your opinion?
Let's just go back in terms of the, how the process works. So yesterday we did have 3 of the unions, NUM being one of them, WASA and Solidarity, who put their demands forward. So on Tuesday, today we'll see AMCU come to the party with their demands, and we'll also hear from the employers with regards to what they can afford. Now the chief negotiator, that's Elise Stradom, has said that they're going to be very much looking at the sustainability of the industry as a whole. Now there have been mixed reactions that come through with the statements from the chamber saying that the wage negotiations or the wages should not be the focal point. They also need to look at other socioeconomic factors. So this is, really, like I said, has been met with mixed reactions. We have had, unions wanting around 100% increments, and the chamber has said this is not sustainable. So we'll see where this leads, Victor. Of course, the negotiations are still ongoing at this point. So
difficult for the mining sector, because not so long ago we had the wranglings about the charter, the BEE charter, that the mining sector is not transformed. To talk about sustainability would be a lot easier if the scorecards look better on other things. Thank you to Mr. Greater. Next up, Oni Sunday joins us from Port Harcourt in Nigeria to sum up some of the top stories out of West Africa. Oni, a Spanish billionaire, Alberto Cortina, has his eyes set on the rest of West Africa's banking market following the launch of his bank in Dakar, Senegal, earlier this month. What's the deal in Senegal, Oni?
Well, that's right, Victor. The Spanish billionaire and former Barclays CEO is building a banking presence in West Africa to take advantage of demand from sovereign and corporate clients. Now, he plans to, of course, operate in West Africa's Economic and Monetary Union region. At the moment, he is conducting due diligence on a retail bank in Senegal. This comes after, of course, he began operations with Banque de Dakar Investment Bank this month. But interestingly, he's not the only one looking to take advantage of West Africa's prospects. I mean, South Africa's Standard Bank Group also plans to expand in the region, using Ivory Coast as its hub.
Well, the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, is set to pull its resources towards establishing an electricity market. They aim to end the blackouts that have affected at least 15 member states for decades. Tell us about that.
Oh, well, Victor, this is welcome news for the region. I mean, this is a region where 57% of its people are without electricity. Now, 20 years after this plan was conceived, actually, finally, heads of state in the West African region are taking this up and have agreed to establish about 1,300 kilometers of interconnection lines across Ivory Coast, Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Now, the region currently produces 10,000 megawatts and 4,000 kilometers of transmission lines. The region actually needs 26,000 megawatts of generation capacity. I mean, it's hoped that if this scales through in the next 10 years, blackouts will be a thing of the past in West Africa. We'll just have to keep our fingers crossed on that.
And finally, it looks like hard times will stay with Ghana for a while longer before things get better, Oni. They have already gone to the IMF for a bailout. We know that. Oil revenues are not great. And now they are set to make even less money from mining as well.
Oh, well, true, Victor. Not really cherry news for the Ghanaians at this point in time. I mean, the country's mineral revenue fell 17% to about $4 billion in 2014. And that's down from $4.8 billion in 2013. Well, however, here it's owing to lower gold prices in the international market and, of course, a decline in the shipment of manganese, which dropped by 32% in 2014. Now, that was owing to, of course, Ghana's major client's inability to lift manganese in the third quarter of 2014. Now, even though the mining sectors, I mean, diamond went up as high as about 33%, that still cannot, of course, offset the decline the mining sector is seeing at the moment.
Thank you, Oni Sunday out of Port Harcourt, Nigeria. Stay with Africa Business News. This week, one Southern African country celebrates its independence on June 25th, to be exact. I'm talking about Mozambique, currently the driver and hub of Africa's economic resurgence. This former colony of Portugal gained independence in 1975, ushering in the era of Frelimo rule, giving Africa some of the greatest leaders like Samora Machel and the later recipient of the Mo Ibrahim Governance Award, Joachim Chissano. Producer of coal, petroleum, graphite, and many more other commodities, this country borders key economies in the region, such as South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Tanzania. For June 25th, then, it is Happy Independence Day to the people of Mozambique. We're back with you next week with more Africa Business News. We thank Oni Sunday out of Port Harcourt, Boni Tunya in Nairobi, and earlier on, Tumisho Greater here in Johannesburg. Stay tuned to CNBC Africa until next week. Adios.